Good morning, everyone. It looks like a few people are still joining, so we're going to wait maybe another 15 or 20 seconds and let everybody get logged in. Thank you so much for joining. All right, it looks like we've got everybody on. So good morning and thank you for joining us for the Sage 100 year-end webinar for the distribution modules. My name is Deanna Carrillo, a project manager here at Microaccounting, and I will support Kate Kruger as she presents information on the inventory, purchase order, and sales order modules this morning for year-end training. You should have received an email with handouts for the presentation earlier today. They can also be found in the attachment section of our webinar. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. We have everyone set to listen only mode as we will be recording the session. Each of you will receive a link to that recording upon conclusion of the event. Since you are muted, please use the question feature to type in any questions, and we'll be taking periodic breaks throughout the presentation to answer them. If you experience any problems during the webinar, or if you need me to send you the handouts again, you can use the chat feature to note those concerns. As a reminder, we are offering the payroll module year-end training on December 12th at 10 a.m. I would love for you to join us for that session if it's applicable to your team. So without further ado, welcome to Microaccounting's 2024 Sage 100 Distributions Module year-end presentation by Kate Kruger. Kate, it's all yours.
Thank you, Deanna. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, ma'am, we see the order of module closing document.
Excellent. Oh, great. Okay, well, like Deanna said, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know for some people, year end is about holidays and family time and fun, but for those of us with the ERP systems, we got to get our modules closed and then we can celebrate our year end. So thank you for spending the time with us this morning. This is one of your handouts that you will, if you haven't already received, you will. And this is just walking through the Sage 100 order of module closing. And I want to highlight that we're going to go to purchase order first, then sales order, then inventory. For us, we're not going to talk about production management, but those of you that do use production management, we snuck it right in there between sales order and inventory. And the module order is important because there are transactions. If you think about it, there could be open purchase orders that need to be posted, and that would inform possibly production management and inventory, and then ultimately the GL. So we do work from the top to bottom here, and we'll start with purchase order. Once I get my stuff reorganized, there we go. I'm working in Sage 100 2024, and I have a company I created specifically for us today, which is the year end of 2024 company. So when we talk about doing the year end, one of the most important elements that we want to cover is making sure we have those good backups. Now, hopefully you have either in-house or external IT that is backing up your servers regularly so that you don't lose any work if something were to happen. But when we're doing processes like period end, it changes a lot of tables and you can't reverse some of the things that we're doing. So it's a good idea to confirm you have a backup and possibly make one of your own. So one of the ways to do that, there's a couple of different ways. You might make a backup company that would represent a kind of like a snapshot of your data before you made any changes. Or you can actually go through the steps of making like a zip file of your Sage 100 data. We'll go through these steps, but be aware they can be a little different if you are using Sage 100 Premium or the one with the SQL backend. The extra step that you would take there is to make backups through SQL Management Studio, which I can help you with independently if that's something that you're wondering how to do and you need to make those. Otherwise, your IT company or somebody in-house might have that knowledge. So for our purposes today, when you're in your Sage 100, the first thing you need to know is where those files are if you're going to just make a zip file of your company data. The easiest way to determine that is to go to File, and you go to Run, and you're going to type a little asterisk and then the word info. So that asterisk is important. It's kind of hard to see in some of the screenshots if you find this online, but it is there and you do need it. When you click OK, you're going to get this screen that gives you some good information if you're ever working with support and they need to know your serial number or what version you're on. But this is really what we're after right now, and that's the installed directory path. So I'm just highlight that, and I'm just going to Control C and copy it. And then when I go to my File Explorer, which I'm going to drag over here for you, and then I've just pasted that path. You can see it takes me to the home folder. If I back out one level, this Mass 90 folder is everything. So as long as you have this Mass 90 folder, you would be able to restore should something go sideways. If you are using Premium, you need this folder and then those databases out of the SQL Studio. So a little bit extra for you. But all you would need to do here is right-click and compress to zip file. And that's going to grind a little bit. I'm actually not going to let mine do that because this is my development system and it's rather large, but it will make you a zip file. And you could copy that zip file someplace else and keep it safe. So that would serve as a backup for you. If you only want your company data, if you come into this Mass 90 folder, you'll see these Mass underscore, and then you'll find your company code here. So we're working with the Y24. I can right click just on that folder and the file is that I complete because that should be pretty small. Once you have that zip file, that'll serve as a backup company if you need it. The other thing people like to do here at year-end is create that backup company. And that happens here in company maintenance in Library Master. And this is something that we have step-by-steps for that we're happy to send to you if you need them. I want to take a moment and emphasize this is really important to do the correct way, because if you accidentally copy this the wrong way, there is no way to undo it. So you would need to, the only way to do it is restore from a backup. And so I really want to emphasize that this is important to do the correct way. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to walk through it with you for a couple times, provide screenshots, videos, whatever we can to make sure this goes successfully for you. But when you're creating that backup company, I'm just going to call it BCK for backup, which is a terrible name because you wouldn't be able to know what year or whatever you did here. But for our purposes today, it's going to work just fine. I like to attach the date, and then you need to specify what kind of company this is. Setting the kind of company tells Sage whether or not others are allowed to copy over it. So if you have a live company, you can actually restrict someone through security that they can't copy over a live company. And it's helping to prevent that situation I'm talking about where you accidentally copy a blank company or a test company over your live data. And everybody just got the chills, and I agree, it's terrible and scary. So that's why I emphasize how important this is. Sorry, I want that to be an archive company. So I've created a brand new company code. I first need to activate it. And I'm going to do this for GL only. And you have to do GL and common information together. But you're seeing you could specify which modules you want to create. Right now, it's just creating blank files for my new backup company. You can see I just have these. So the next thing you would do is click copy. And it's really important to start on your new clean company code, because that's going to help you make sure you don't copy it the wrong way. Got a little warning here, I'm clicking yes. And then my source company is going to be my, sorry, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Now I selected Y23 and it has all these modules activated. So it automatically suggested, hey, let's copy all of them. I don't want that. I can click on select and just again specify my general ledger and my common information. Sage is really good about not letting you activate or copy a module without the other modules it needs. Like if you do sales order, you have to do accounts receivable as well. It won't let you copy because it needs that data. So I'm just doing GL. Again, this is where I like to take a moment and be like, My destination is my backup. My source is my live. Looks good. It even asks you out of habit. Sorry, I've been doing this for 21 years and I still follow some of these weird little things to make sure I don't do it the wrong way. But this is my chance to be, again, confirming my destination company. I click yes to this. And that is going to be my snapshot as of right now. The general ledger and common information are identical in backup as they are to that Y23 company. So those are the quick ways to make a backup. Again, it does not replace your IT taking full and verified backups at a regular interval. So it's important to make sure that's happening as well. But if you're about to do something kind of scary and you want to just have that extra comfort blanket of a good backup, then those are the steps that you would want to take. Okay, so let's talk about purchase orders specifically now. The reason we're all here, purchase order. When we talk about year end and period end, there's a series of steps that we want to go through. There are reports that need to be run. We need to make sure that we're in balance with the general ledger. And there's some setup options that come into play that could impact what history we're keeping. So we're going to start there. In purchase order, and I have everything expanded because if you know me, you know I like to get every single thing open that I possibly can and then wonder where I put it. So we have purchase order options here, and there are some important settings here. The first one here is days to retain completed purchase orders. In this company, it is set to 0. And what that means is that if I have completed purchase orders, as long as they are 0 days old, they were completed 0 days ago, they are going to be removed from purchase order entry. They will still be in history and your history inquiries, but they would not be in your main purchase order entry screen. So that is controlling how long those stay. Like you can run it up to 999 days. And so once a purchase order is 3 or so years old-ish, not quite, 2.5 years old, it would take them out. So that is a setting that is going to matter for this. And then on the history tab, there's some additional ones here. Whether or not you're retaining purchase order history, that's a really important one to make sure is checked. We want to make sure we're keeping that purchase order history. Otherwise, when they're completed and they drop out of open, they would just be gone, and that's uncomfortable. You have some additional options here just about retaining deleted orders. So think about if you started a purchase order, you saved it, you haven't really done anything with it yet, and you delete it. Do you want it to ask you to keep it in history? That's what prompt would do, automatically keep it in history, or just no, don't keep it in history. If I delete it, I'm intentionally deleting it. And you have the same options for deleted lines. So on a purchase order, if you delete a specific line, do you want that to be kept in history or not? My rule of thumb is to always keep everything, because I've never said like, oh darn, I wish we didn't have those backups, or I wish we didn't have all that history. If we do get to the point where it's slowing down the system or making your database too large, then there are some things we can do and make archive companies. But if you know me at all, I like to keep my history. The years to retain purchase history by item and vendor. That is also something that's going to be evaluated when you're running purchase order close. It will look and see if anything is older than this 8 years, then it will take it out of history. So if you are one of those systems that you have 20 years of data, and I feel you, I love the data, but it's just starting to be too much, this is an area where you can trim that down and it'll remove some of that stuff that is just too old. The retain receipt history, again, yes is my favorite default, but you can choose say no or summary only, which would be the amount of the receipt, but it wouldn't contain the detail, like which items were actually on those receipt of invoice or receipt of goods. And then until period end would keep all the details for the current period, but then when you run period or year end, it would purge it. Again, yes is my favorite. And then whether or not you want to retain your comment lines, that one's up to you. The last thing here is the purging purchase order recap. And if you use the purchase order recap report, you know that it's just a, I'll go ahead and take a look at it, just in case you haven't seen it, and I can show you something new. Oh, I have the options open, so it won't let me, but I'll show it to you. You have the option, what you're seeing there is to purge it at period or year end. And so what this is doing is it's just a representation of your open purchase orders. It's telling you what the status is, the last invoice, if it is completed, what that date was. And so it's very high level, like you're seeing there is not item detail here, but it's a good metric of just what is open at the time that I'm trying to do my period end. And this is what will be cleaned out and rebuilt as part of period end if you have that option selected. So again, you can find those in the setup folder of purchase order, and your history tab is the number 7 tab. It does require you to have users out of purchase order if you do need to change these. If you look at yours and it says something crazy like don't retain purchase order history, you'll want to make sure that users are out, and then you can go ahead and check that box. Okay, so now that you have an idea of what could be taken out while you're processing your purchase orders, the next step is to reconcile. And for purchase order, some of you, this is the bane of your existence, where your purchases clearing report does not tie to your general ledger and you don't know why, and you're seeing really old purchase orders on there because they're just out there and they won't complete and drop off. So let's talk about that for a little bit here. The purchases clearing report lives in the period end folder. And what this is a representation of purchase orders that have been received but not yet invoiced, or invoiced and not yet received. It's a clearing account between accounts payable and inventory. You can run it in a variety of different ways. This is the standard purchases clearing report that I selected, but notice you do have purchases clearing in open PO and then also from history. The from history is a newer addition, so anybody running on 2021 or older, possibly 22, I honestly don't remember when this came in, you may not see this one. And what the history is trying to give you the ability to run it, what was my purchases clearing as of the end of last month, because the standard purchases clearing report is an as of today. You don't run it based on any date. Like you can see, there's no date selection here as far as a filter. So this report should match your general ledger account as of right now. Let's just take a look at what this guy looks like. So it's breaking down your purchase orders by inventory item, and it's telling you how many you've ordered, what you've received, and what you've invoiced. As you know, the purchase order can't drop off this report until the quantity ordered matches the quantity received and matches the quantity invoiced. So with all these ones that are still just waiting for transactions, that's why they're still out here. So what you're doing here is noticing my total of the purchases clearing report, and that's what we want to match to our general ledger. So you may ask the question, which general ledger account are we trying to reconcile to? And you can find that if you go to inventory management in your setup, the product line maintenance is where you establish which purchases clearing account to use. So for every product line on the accounts tab, there is this purchases clearing account. It's possible that you have different purchases clearing accounts for different product lines. So you want to page through your product lines and just make sure you're seeing this, which general ledger accounts you need to reconcile. Okay. Also notice if you are in your settings are posting by warehouse, because that could change one of your segments. So maybe it's the first 2 segments are the same, but the last segment could be changing based on warehouse. All right, so now that we know the account, the next thing we want to do is see what our account balance is. You can do this a number of different ways. You can do the trial balance account and just specify show me for the purchases clearing. Confirming your ending balance. Let's make sure that we're running it for the correct ending. So this is so you can see I'm not in balance. I've got something wrong. Such a familiar feeling. I know, it's scary. So I've got a difference here. So what do we want to do about that? There's a couple things that you want to do, and these reconcile steps and are in the handout because I feel like they're useful. So the first thing you want to do, if your purchases clearing does not match your general ledger, is come to purchase order and the main and give this daily transaction register a run. It's oftentimes stuff gets stuck here. As you know, there's an update process to update purchase order, then you run the daily transaction register and that pushes it all the way to the GL. Well, if something happens and somebody doesn't push it all the way through, you can end up with transactions that have updated purchase order, but they haven't hit the GL. So oftentimes running the daily transaction register will shake those loose and then you'll be in balance. That is not our problem. We look good there. So the next thing I want to do, I do it this way, just because I find it easier, but I'll also show you how to do this from a report standpoint. But I just am opening account maintenance for the purchases clearing. And what I'm looking for is a transaction that did not originate from purchase order. Because really, when we're talking about the purchases clearing account, there should only be purchase order entries in here. And right away, this receipt of good one jumps out. You can see with the IR that it was done through inventory, which you can see what they were trying to do, but those should not be done to the purchases clearing account. If you truly received goods that way, then you would do an inventory adjustment, not against the purchases clearing account. So that is probably why we're out of balance. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to reverse that journal by using my blue little arrow layer. And I think these little guys need to go too, but I'll show you what that looks like. So I've clicked the button to reverse that journal. I still need to review and update it. But you can see it did load this for me. It loads it as of the current date. It's actually holding on to yesterday for me here. But you can, just based on what periods are still open in your general ledger, you could post this to when that journal actually happened. But if you are closed and reported for that period, you may need to post it to a different period. I'm going to leave it in December, just because that's when I'm reconciling. But you can see it loaded that journal up for me, so all I need to do is post it after reviewing carefully to make sure it is correct. That wasn't meant to sound sarcastic. It is actually correct. Sorry, I do tend to. All right. So then now if I look at my account balance, I'll go back to the report. Okay, we're getting closer. So this is those other journals that are there that are causing this balance. So my point is that you are looking for transactions that do not belong or should not have been posted directly into the purchases clearing account. One of the other issues that you'll see is a purchase order was put in, you performed the receipt of goods, but accidentally the receipt of invoice was done through accounts payable instead of through purchase order. That happens a lot, and the vendor is correct, they're getting paid, everything's working that way, but the purchase order is never going to complete. So you have to do, you need to do a reversing step, reverse that invoice to the vendor, and then do a purchase order receipt of invoice. If that invoice was already paid and that would be too difficult, you can do another receipt of invoice in purchase order, and then do a credit memo to relieve the balance from the accounts payable vendor account. Excuse me. So there are some other things to note about with the purchases clearing report. If you changed the quantity ordered or the unit price between receipt of goods and receipt of invoice, then the purchases clearing is going to be stuck pretty much. So you would need to adjust the original quantity ordered back to what it was, and either do another line to bring it back into balance, or it will resolve once you complete the invoice, because once it sees the quantity received and the quantity invoiced are the same, it may book a variance if the costs change, but it will complete and remove the purchase order from the purchases clearing report. Let me pause there before we go through the actual steps of closing the purchases clearing or the purchase order module. Deanna, do I have any questions or any directive?
No, ma'am, no questions at this point. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. It's because everybody's following my rabbit train of thought here. But okay, so once you are in balance, and as we all saw, I'm not quite in balance yet, but we're going to pretend I am, because that's me playing with my development system. And you're ready to close your period end. You've made any backups that you wanted to, you've made archive companies that you wanted to. There are a couple of other steps you want to take before you actually kick off period end. And I'm saying period end, but period and year end, they function the same way. So we can, in our case, we are talking about year end because it's December, but period end is going to be the same thing. The first thing you want to note is whether or not you have your paperless office turned on for your period end reports. If you use paperless office for everything, then it probably is, but it's important to, we like this turned on because it's going to make PDFs of everything that you're trying to generate instead of printing hundreds of pages of data. And so we don't have filing cabinets that big anymore, I feel like. So when we look at, here, I just have an all. I'm in paperless office, the setup folder, and then this is period end report maintenance. I've established, I have just all, and then given it a path as to where to create these. And what that's doing is automatically creating everything I'm printing to a PDF. It's also giving me the ability to come right here after the fact to my main folder and my period end report viewer. And from here, it will load up, okay, I haven't completed period end yet, makes sense, all of my period end documents. So it's very quick to find your period end reports that you ran. And that's why I'm a big advocate of turning on paperless office and letting it do its thing. That didn't make sense. Letting it do its thing. This is why they don't let me talk to people. Okay, so but before, so we have confirmed that our paperless office is ready to go. The next, we want to run a couple of reports that are going to change based on our period end. So we want those reports before period end and then after, just to make sure that nothing went weird on us. We've already talked about the purchases clearing report, and in our world, we'll make sure that it matches to the general ledger. We want to run that purchase order recap report that we saw before. we want to keep a copy of that. I also recommend running the purchase order receipt history report, because if you do have anything older than that 8 years in our case. We're getting close with this demo data, but we're not there yet. Let's just take a look at what that looks like. Because some of this data could be purged out if it's old enough. It's good practice to make sure you generate a copy of this. And let me hold right there a second. I want to talk about something. If you're wanting to create that PDF and you have configured your paperless office for reports, the bottom option for your printer dropdown here is paperless office. And then with that selected and you just click print, it gives you some options here. Like you want to store it as a PDF. It knows that, it checked its little box. But do you want to see that PDF? Do you want it, if you are already using emailing, you can turn that on and also email somebody a copy of the report. But I'm just going to proceed. As you see how easy this is, it throws its little generation and it's done. So now you have that PDF. If you wanted to, if you did not have it auto display and you were like, wait, where did that go? You can go back up here to report viewer. He's being kind of challenging to me. Why? Oh, I know why that is. I security'd myself out of it. Good times. Okay, let me go with my normal login. I like to use that YE user because it has so much. I like to slim down what I'm seeing in my modules, but oh no, this guy's going to be fun too. I love technology. Quick, someone open a support ticket. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so something's going on with my system, but in the rest of our worlds, it will display its the PDFs that you are creating. But because this is a live webinar, stuff goes weird. Just love it. Okay. So that we've run the purchases clearing, we've run the purchase order recap, we've run the receipt history report. The purchase order history report, this guy does not purge as part of what we're doing here, but it is good to still run it and just have that copy so that if you do see something changing, you can analyze what happened there. The general ledger posting recap does clear based on that years to retain GL history, and that settings in the general ledger itself. So if we've gotten to the point where we're starting to purge the general ledger history, we just want to make sure we have these reports run and saved. And okay. All right. So one more setup step, and then we actually will run the clearing here, or the purchase order period end. But the last thing we want to do is click on period end report selection. So these are the default reports that Sage suggests that should be run as part of period end. Some of these we've already talked about: the purchase order recap, the purchase history, and the purchase order receipt history. But I want to point out here that you can specify a different report setting. So if you have open purchase order report, if you have multiple settings right here, and maybe that's because you have formatted something to go nicely to Excel, or you've added or removed data, you can create those unique report settings by choosing just save as from that little tiny arrow next to the save button. So I'm just going to call this YE for year end. I'm going to click OK. And maybe then I have made some very specific settings here, like I only want my standard orders, and all statuses is good. I do want orders on hold, and I want all my comments. So just instead of having to go through all these settings every time and make these changes, you can do it once and you save it as your custom report setting, and now that lives there for you. And once that's created, it is then going to be an option here as my period end report. So you can walk through each of these. You can also add new ones if you're like, I also want to run, trying to look for something that they don't already have. So say you use production management. I want the open work ticket report as well. You can add that. You can change all your report settings, and then you could click accept here. If you don't want these, like I don't care about the expected delivery recap, you can just highlight that line, and then the little red X is going to let you get rid of that. So click accept, and now those are preserved for us. Okay, now the moment you've all been waiting for, the period end actual processing. This checkbox, if you have already printed and preserved all the reports that you could possibly want and you don't want any more, then you can uncheck this box and you don't have to print the period end reports as part of the period end processing. However, I'm going to leave it checked because I just love data, and I'm going to click proceed here. And before I click proceed, I do want to notice that what period it thinks it's closing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It is confirming these. Notice I can uncheck. I'm like, oh, I didn't want that one. I can uncheck it here. I can't add any new ones or influence which report setting I'm using here. But it does give you the chance to maybe say like, hey, don't do that. Okay, I'm going to click print. And I want to highlight this because even though I have security to myself out of my, I still can view all the PDFs that are being created. And it's nice because it attaches the PE, so I know that it is period end, and it then appends the date that it's closing, the 12/31. And so this is my final confirmation. It is going to change me from period 12 of 24 to period 1 of 25, and I can say yes to this. Okay, so all the things we talked about happened. Any completed purchase orders, they're gone. Any history that was old enough has gotten purged out. Things have been recalculated and rerun. So I am all set. And if I go to my setup folder and my purchase order options, I can see that my current calendar year is 25 now, and my current period is 01. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about the utilities folder in the purchase order module. Some of these are run as part of period end, but it's important to note that you can run these anytime you want. They again are a little bit intense, so making sure you've got that good backup. You hear me say that a lot. Like I like job security, but I don't want to, you to have to recreate all your data. So some of the things that you have available to you here, purging those completed purchase orders. If you had a bunch of open purchase orders and you've gone through that really painful process of getting them all cleaned up so that they complete and are ready to leave, you don't have to wait till period end to run this. It can, let me set my date because this is being fun. Okay. So you can run these at any time that you want to. And it is grabbing that setting from our purchase order options. We have it set to complete 0 days. But for your systems, this may be 30, this may be 999. It could be really anything there. And you can specify what date. And then you're just going to click proceed. Got a double double confirm. And so that's taking out those open ones, but then based on your history settings, it's just moving them over. They'll still be in purchase order history for you to find there. So the other ones we're talking about here, the expired master and repeating orders. Let me come back up here to here. If you have any master or repeating orders, they have a date here. And it's important to note that regardless of how much of the order is filled, if that expire date happens, it will remove the purchase order. It's, again, still in history, but if you had an order for 5,000 and you had only shipped 1,000, but the expire date has lapsed, if you run this utility, it will take that out. So just, I like to point that out because so many places in Sage, it's really finicky about you have to have everything complete before it'll take it out. This is not one of those areas. It hits that date and it is done. It's located in the same place if you have a repeating order. It's just the same field. So pay attention to those. That is your expired master or repeating orders. The completed or canceled PO recap is the report that is going to, if you're not purging it as part of your year or period end, then you would manually run it here to clean that report up. Obsolete is a funny guy. This is trying to help address those ones that are so old, but they're not going to resolve. This works a little bit tricky with your purchases clearing because obsolete will take it out, even though it maybe still appeared on the purchases clearing. So there could be a cleanup step in the general ledger that you'd have to do to remove the other half. But this is Sage trying to say, if this purchase order is like 25 years old, it's probably, we can probably take it out. But that's something that we can help you with determining if it's appropriate for you to run it and what date you should run it for. We're happy to help with that. This is again a good use of a test company. Make a copy of your live company and then you can run all these utilities in that test company to see what they're going to do. Purging purchase order history, that's kind of a big important one. Again, you would only be running that if you had so much history, your system was getting slowed down, your lookups and reports are slow, you've made an archive company, so you can still get to that data if you need it. You might then, it's like then and only then, would you consider running the purging of purchase order history in your live company. Receipt history is the same way, or same idea. Just we'd want to make sure we have all our copies and archives here. And then the purging histories by item by vendor, if you're saving this in your options and it's great, you have the setting set to more than 2 years, this is the utility that you would use to take this out. Like you saw in our setups, it was 8 years. So unless we, so you would use this utility if you need to purge this before that time. But notice it doesn't give you the ability to do it for a specific vendor or for a specific item. This is going to just take all of your history. So these utilities are a little bit, we're really grateful when we have them, but again, you just want to be careful with them. The create purchase order history is a fun one. And you only use this as your, when you upgraded to this version of Sage from an older version that did not keep the same level of detail, this create purchase order history will help create that missing data. Pretty much everyone on this call would not need to use that, but just in case you're wondering what the heck that was, that's what it is. Okay, I'm going to pause there a second because that is purchase order. Is there any other questions or thoughts or feelings?
No questions, Kate. Doing a great job. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, So if we revisit our closing order, we can see that sales order is next. I don't know why I felt the need to drag that all the way. I'm by myself too much. Okay. All right, so moving into sales order. Sales order we like because it does not have that same, it doesn't have a reconciliation step. There is no like open sales order general ledger account that we need to make balance. So sales order is a little bit of an easier animal to deal with. Let me squeeze them all up. But there are some settings that we need to make sure are correct before we launch into closing the period. Those again are in the setup folder, sales order options, and they are first noting what current year and period we're in, because that helps us know when we're closed. And then on this history tab, there's some options here. Again, I always love to keep as much as I can. And so making sure that your retained sales orders quote history is checked, making sure it's kept for an appropriate amount of years. This one's hard for me because I like to run it way up there, but we do run into situations with, you know, some of those users that have been on Sage for 20 plus years. It starts to build up, so we have to restrict that a little. These are similar to what we saw in purchase order, where retaining deleted orders, you can say yes, no, or prompt. This one's a little bit, and it's true in purchase order too, but if you are very, very carefully tracking your sales order numbers, then that is one where you maybe would not keep it deleted so that you could reuse a number. I have some clients where that's important, so that's an instance where you would not keep the deleted, but that's the only, if it has any history and such, it won't let you just straight delete it. But I wanted to point out, I guess there was a reason to have that set to no in case you check that and then you felt judged by me. There may be a business reason for it. Then same options for deleted lines and orders and quotes. Yes, no, or prompt. If you are using lot serial items, let's set that to both lot and serial. And then additionally, you've got your, whether or not you want to build your customer's last purchase history. If you're using that, and that is when you're in sales order and you have the button to click and it shows you the things your customer, that specific customer has purchased from you, that is what it's looking at to do. So if this is set to yes, it's going to keep track of all the stuff your customers have purchased indefinitely. No, obviously would not do that. And then invoice is just going to keep track of the last invoice for the customer. So that's what that setting is about. Back ordered lines and invoice history. If you have an order and you shipped 2 of the 3 items on the order, that back ordered line, do you want to see that as part of invoice history, or do you just want it to stay as sales order history, and when it does finally get shipped, then it would go to invoice? It's a very specific condition there, but you do have that option. And then your ship to detail, we like that checked so that you can confirm where it was sent. And then like purchase order, sales order has a recap, and whether or not that gets automatically purged as part of your end, it looks to this setting to know if it should do that. We close out of there and we'll take a look at that recap just in case you haven't seen it. Notice there's a bunch of them. They can be run by product line, by warehouse, by product line, by warehouse, and by division. So lots of, that's the sales, sorry, that's the sales order recap is this one. This is the one that's controlled by the setting that we just saw. So pretty simple. It is just giving you your open order totals, but it's a good snapshot of what was open at the time that you're starting this process. All right. Okay, so the reports that you would want to have run before you do your period end are any customer or sales report that you utilize. If this is a report that you're running constantly to see the status of your business or can get information from, you should run that as part of your period end and have a good backup copy of that. We want to run the sales order recap because that one could be purged as part of the the period end. The lot serial number history is, you want to make sure you run that, especially if if you're going to run the purge lot and serial history as part of your period end cleanup process. The sales order and quote history report, this could be impacted if you have orders and quotes that are old enough to exceed that keep history requirement. So it was 8 years. So if you've got orders that are 8 years or older and they're going to be removed by the period end, make sure you run that report. Okay, the rest of this looks pretty similar. When you open period end, you only have 2 choices here, the period end report selection. This is just like what we saw in a purchase order, where you can specify different report settings if you have them. You can also add, I don't know, I guess I'll do this one. If this got really crazy or if you opened it up and it is blank, you can click this reset default and it will, let me just make it big, just reset it to the one that what Sage considers to be the default reports for period end. Okay, I can make sure that's all set. And you don't have to go into that every period end. If you have done this and you know that your reports are just right and just what you want, you can skip that step and go to period end processing. Same story, make sure that you are closing the period you intend to be closing, and then whether or not you want to print them at this step or not. I'm going to proceed. And I'm going to click print. All those PDFs are created, even though my viewer is being grumpy and I won't show them to me. I like to call that extra security. They're so secure. I can't get to the. While these run, any questions on sales order? This is my easiest one, my easiest guy.
No questions here. Thank you.
All right, Deanna, you broke up a little on me, but I think that was a no.
Sorry,
Not
yes,
a no.
that was a no.
Okay, sorry. I didn't want to ignore a question if it was out there. This is where we should have some nice hold music to play. Okay, here we go. So confirming that we're going into period 1 of 2025, and I would just click yes. Just to be extra thorough, I can go back to my sales order options and see that it is open. Hey, sales order. Sales order is like our little break in these 3 modules, because purchase order has all the reconciliation and then inventory has reconciliation as well. So everybody take a moment and appreciate how simple sales order was. Feels nice. Okay, going into inventory. So period end in inventory kind of does some more stuff than the other modules do. When you're looking at your quantities, it actually is resetting your beginning balances and your calculations for all of these. So as it's looking at whatever default range you have set here, it's going to recalculate that, the beginning balance quantity, and it also is going to recalculate the average cost for each item. So it's looking at this here, and then Sage also tracks the average cost by each warehouse. So there's actually a couple of different places that the average cost is going to be recalculated. It advances your, this used to be a hard and fast thing, but as you know, in the newer versions, you actually have some control over what transactions are showed here. But if you're set to the last calendar year or the previous, or the last 6 months, whatever it is using the current period to decide what is quote unquote the last 6 months or the current time frame that it wants. So that is going to change and roll forward. And you may or may not see transaction history be removed based on your setup. So we're going to look at those in a second. So the inventory actually does quite a lot, but let's double check our settings. We have the current calendar year and current period as we have had in the other modules, and then inventory does have the ability to base inventory on calendar or fiscal periods. So if you're using fiscal periods but you want your inventory to be calendar, this is where you would control that. Okay, and then on the additional here, the tracking changes to master file. If this is turned on, it will help us keep track of any, if as the average cost changes, and that will be recorded here. So you want to make sure that's checked. This is something that file can get kind of huge, especially if you are regularly updating prices or descriptions or your vendors are changing. So if you're feeling like your audit table is getting giant, let us know and we can help you slim it down, get rid of stuff that's so old you don't need it anymore. So inventory, being the special critter that he is, there's common information and inventory. And the actual history for inventory is kept in the common information options, which is the common information folder, and then the setup. But this is the years to retain item history. And it's here because Sage treats inventory items, miscellaneous charges, comment codes, they're all actually in the same file. They're just what you see when you're in different places in Sage is controlled by Sage itself. So because it's one big file, they set the years to retain here in common information. Okay, so again, we're set to 8 there. Looks good. Close this so it doesn't blow up on me. Okay, so for inventory, the reconciliation step is we got to make sure that your inventory trial balance report matches your general ledger accounts. You might have the question, which general ledger accounts? Because maybe you have multiple, and that again is determined by product line maintenance and the accounts tab, and you're looking here at this first row, which is what is the inventory account. Again, noting if the post by warehouse is turned on, because you could actually have multiple accounts represented by that one line. So as we go through here, just making sure it's the same for every product line. If it's not, then you would just need to make sure you're including all of the general accounts, general ledger accounts when you're getting your balances. Okay, so then the question is, what is the balance of those accounts? This is my custom report setting, and I already have it filtered to look at the inventory accounts, and I am accounting for the different warehouses here. So there's 3 accounts there, making sure my ending balance is the right period. Okay. So that is my, I gotta do some math. 12,596. Okay. So that will give you what the general ledger has as your ending balances. So we're going to hang on to that. And in inventory, the reports folder, it's really important to be using the trial balance report. And the reason for that, I call this out in the reconciliation steps. It is possible to have an inventory transaction that somebody put in through transaction entry, and they dated it, let's say December of 2025 accidentally. They just were typing numbers and 2025. So they have posted it a year in the future. But then when it posts to the general ledger, they correctly posted it to this month, December of 24. You have a situation where the inventory module isn't going to see that transaction until December of next year, but the general ledger has it now. The inventory trial balance report is only going to use the posting date. It is going to ignore the incorrect date in this case and use the transaction date posted to the GL. So if you have that situation, you still would want to get it fixed, but it would not make this out of balance. So that was a struggle, but let me show you what I mean here. So confirming what date you want to print the trial balance, which materials you want to use here. And notice you can filter this out by product line. So if you have one product line that posts to a different general ledger account and you just want to treat that one separately, you can do that using these filters. I'm going to keep all my friends in the same place. Okay, and so the trial balance is trying to give you kind of a snapshot of what happened, because you're seeing it's walking through the beginning balance, the activity, the ending, and then also the dollar amounts, beginning, activity, and ending. So if I go all the way to the back, I have a different ending balance than my general ledger. My general ledger is like 12,596, and obviously I've got something a little bit more here. So what to do when you are out of balance? First, make sure you're running the inventory trial balance. It's tempting to want to run the valuation, but that is going to use those incorrect dates if they're out there, and you're going to have a wider out of balance. Now, it's a good idea to use the inventory valuation to find those out of balance transactions, not out of balance, transactions posted to the wrong date. But when we're period end reconciling, inventory trial balance is your huckleberry. So my first step, like I mentioned with purchase order, is to make sure the daily transaction register is updated. So then I'm in the main folder, the daily transaction register. I'll see if there's anything here. And in this case, there is. There's a transaction waiting out here to be posted. It got posted to the GL or to the inventory, but not to the general ledger. So this is going to help get me into balance. So making sure those are updated. Similar to purchase order, taking a look at the general ledger detail report. You may end up running this for like the entire year or whenever you last reconciled, using that as a starting point. But my inventory, again, I need to choose all the inventory accounts that have the same. It's that last segment that's changing when that post by warehouse is checked in product line maintenance. So I just need to select these three. No preview. If I do that enough, I probably would set that up as a custom report setting, but okay. So these all look. I would be looking for transactions that are not coming from inventory, purchase order, sales order, or production management or operations management if you use those. So any JT or PM journals. These all look good. If I did find a journal, I would need to reverse that if possible and choose a different offset account, or if it needed to be there, then there has to be something done to inventory to bring it into balance. possibly a revaluation of the on-hand cost. So there's some. The other thing that can be a little weird here is if you have inventory transactions that debit and credit the same general ledger account. It can happen if in product line maintenance you have your cost of goods sold account as the same account as your inventory. So if you had a cost that's going to debit and credit the same general ledger account, and so then your inventory amount is changing, but your general ledger doesn't change. So that's another thing that we look for when we're trying to audit figure out why they're out of balance. And if all that fails, the next thing that we'll do is you will run this general ledger detail report for a single day or a single week. You're kind of following some audit protocol there, but you run it for a certain date range and match that up with the inventory trial balance or the inventory detail transaction report for the same date range. And you're really just looking for why did, see, we can change this guide to be by date. Why did they not change the same amount? And it can take some examination, but you will find a transaction that either debited and credited the same or sorry, or where it posted to an unexpected GL account. Things like that will help you determine why your inventory trial balance does not match your general ledger accounts. Okay. Let me close some stuff up here before I wander. Okay, along with many people will do a physical count as part of your period end process. If you are going to do that, making sure that all your other transactions, your open purchase orders, your sales orders, anything that is going to be is going to impact the count, you will want to include there, or make sure they're posted and updated. And you have a lot of control when you're looking at physical count, whether you want to count, let me make this big for us, a specific product line, a specific warehouse, one bin location, or if you are using inventory cycles in your inventory items, if you have populated that field, you can use that here as well. Once you've determined what it is you're going to count, you want to choose either print worksheet and freeze or freeze items only. And I want to point out here that freeze really just means it's going to take a snapshot of what the current on-hand quantity is. It's not going to stop anyone from making a transaction against that item. It's not going to even tell you, hey, this item's frozen. Are you sure you want to mess with it? It's really just taking that snapshot and keeping it on so it knows what to compare to when you enter the count. So that's just something I like to point out because it's a little bit of a misnomer. I think freeze and I think it's going to actually stop me from doing something, but it doesn't. So I am going to freeze these. And so what it's doing is it's taking I ran it for a specific product line, this PSNA product line. And so it's taking my items and giving me a little counting sheet. You can include the on-hand quantity in this, but it weakens the integrity of the count because you might have a counter that's like, oh, that looks like 12. I'm going to write down 12 when actually it was 15. And it is broken up by warehouse here. So you can hand these sheets to those people and they go count. Let me jump all the way down here to physical count. Because what has happened is when I ran that freeze, it automatically added those items from the product line to my physical count entry. And here's where I can fill in what was counted. There are some additional options here, like you can have it automatically fill in the quantity counted as the quantity on hand, and then just go change the ones that are different. Again, you just have to be mindful of your own procedures. Is that going to be an okay process, or is stuff going to get missed? If somebody counted something and they weren't supposed to, but they did, you can add it right through here. Otherwise, you're just going to click accept and repeat that for everything you've counted. And there's a little bit of a sticky thing there, and I'm going to leave this unpopulated right now. So I want you to see what happens when you post that count, because I told it that I counted 0. This is the variance register. Instead of thinking, oh, she's going to come back and put in the count, here's my first warehouse. So it looks okay. I found some extra, I lost some extra, but normal. It is assuming that I counted nothing, and so it's taking out all of my on-hand quantity. And so it's going to zero out my inventory basically for those 2 warehouses. So that's just something to be, I always emphasize taking a real close look at this variance amount, and if it seems intolerance, and if it's not, figuring out why. Because that will, I'm going to not update that because I like my inventory where it is. But updating that would, if you counted extra, it's going to put that on hand. If you counted less, it's going to take that out of your on-hand quantity, and the offset is going to be to the inventory variance account. So that's the very streamlined view of the physical count. You run that worksheet, do the entry, and then run the register to update it. The count cards are letting you actually generate cards that you would hand to somebody who's counting. Sorry, let me get these. And it's letting you do multiple counts at once. And so instead of having to do just one huge physical count entry, you can count on a smaller, what they're calling cards. So instead of having to wait for the entire count to come in to post and see variance, you can do it by a smaller measure, which would be the count cards. Let me get out of that. Yes. Okay. So once all of that is updated and verified, you're then looking at the actual period end processing for inventory. Get to where I'm going. Okay. So again, printing any report and storing it to PDF that you use on a regular basis, or just is going to contain data for you. Some of the ones that we recommend: the inventory trial balance and the inventory valuation report by period. The valuation report itself, and the difference between these two is that with the report by period, you could filter out, show me as of 12/31 of 24, and it'll exclude any future transactions. The valuation report standard is as of report. It is only going to show you including all future transactions. You can't specify which date range you want to see here. So running both of those. And then also the stock status report. Again, that is an as of, so you're also going to see any future transactions. So if you're running your close at the end of January, those are going to show the January transactions as well. The general ledger posting recap, that is looking back at the general ledger to see how long it is keeping history. So if you have gotten old enough where it's starting to purge that out, making sure you run and retain that is important. And then the audit report that we spoke of, which is right down here, this is keeping track of every change made to the inventory. So if a description changes, a vendor changes, pricing, unit of measure, all that stuff is being tracked with the item audit report based on the settings. If you have it turned on like we saw earlier, it's going to be tracking all of that. And if that's getting huge, then it may be part of your period end process to run that to PDF and then allow it to purge. Let me take a look at that guy. So for the audit report, you can run it for just a specific user or transaction date or item code. I'm gonna run it. These are some of the filters that you can see for if you're just trying to see when the item pricing has been changed, you can just check that box. I'm gonna run it for everything. I am bold. I'm not. This is a brand new company, so I don't know that it has anything there. But again, that does look back at the settings here. Item changes to track of all. Yeah, okay. Just demonstrate what that looks like. It's kind of cool. But if I came through here and if I changed my primary vendor. The audits exist for accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, and inventory, and payroll. And they are a really good source of information, especially if you're like, why are my descriptions changing? Like, I need to know what's going on here. They are really good at capturing the original value and then what the new value is. So you can see it was $84, now it's 100. It was this vendor, and now it's the IBM vendor. So lots of good information there, and you'll see. Sorry, it's a security setting, and I'm in here as YE, but it will prompt you, do you wish to purge it? And that's kind of a high security prompt, because if you have somebody accidentally runs this and then accidentally purges it, you have lost that trackability of these items. So making sure that only your specific users have the ability to purge it, and then you might take control of this and run it as part of your period end and retain it to PDF so that you at least always have it in case you need it. Okay. And in some versions, I think 22 and older, it just automatically asks you, do you wish to purge this? And after you run it, you saw me, I click a button there and it does give me the option to remove it, but that is a security function. So making sure, like I said, people, only the correct people have those. All right, so once you've done all of that, you are now ready to get to the actual period end. And the first step in the period end is the inventory negative tier report. So if you have FIFO or LIFO, lot or serial items, the negative tier, and lot and serial, that would be kind of a concern. But I don't know that this data will have any. But what happens is if you have the setting in Sage that lets you sell or adjust your inventory negative, Sage will let you do that, and it takes that item out at the last known unit cost. And it holds on to that, and it creates this over distribution tier that you may have seen in your inventory. And then when you get that item back in, either you make it or a purchase order or an inventory receipt, if there is a cost difference, Sage wants to make sure to record that because the item that was sold had gone out at the incorrect cost, and so it wants to make an adjustment to make that correct. It also wants to bring your inventory value back up to 0 and just clean that up for us. So the negative tier report is telling you where, like this one, we have an over distribution tier of -8, but we do have 959 on hand. So it is going to reconcile that. I don't think any of these other ones still have negative values, so they haven't been brought in yet, but this one should. So once you run the report, You then have the negative tier adjustment, which is going to give you a breakdown of if it did find any negative tiers that it can reconcile because you now have a positive quantity on hand, it's going to do that using this register. And this one does not have a cost change, so there is no adjustment amount. But if there had been a cost change, you can see how it would lay that out for you and tell you just what the total was. The offset of that is going to be the inventory adjustments account. So if you have inventory that has that over-distribution tier, this is how you can get rid of those. If you have a positive on-hand quantity, you do need to get that quantity on hand, and then you can run the register and it will update it. So I'm gonna say estimate. This may come back with nothing because there was no cost adjustment. Yeah, still good to do it. So once you've run the negative tier report and adjustment, you then, this is starting to look real familiar by now, but you have your report selections, same rules as before, change it if you have a different report setting created, add any other reports that you want to run as part of this process. I don't know, like you could add the item audit. Woohoo! Really make that thing large. But once that looks right, you can click accept. And then we have the actual period end processing, confirming that period 12, we're closing period 12, 2004. We want to print our reports. Click proceed. It asks me again, just, are you sure? Look at all these reports. Again, see all my glorious forms that I'm creating here. And I like that they're stamped with the PE for period end because it really calls out that like this was run as you were closing it. If we ever get called in for like audit process, this is one of the things we look for so we know what happened. What did it look like at the actual close? Okay, confirming you want to go to January of 25, and that's done. So looking at the utilities folder of inventory, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them maybe you will never ever touch, and that's okay. The delete and change items, you would use this to renumber an item if you need to. You also maybe want to merge two items together. Delete is a misnomer because, as you know, if there is history, it won't let you delete the item, but it would let you mark an item for deletion is what this is doing, and then it's not allowed to be used in any sort of transaction. And then once the history is old enough, during that next period end, it would be taken out. But don't get excited because it's not going to actually take it out of there. And so that's where we do have some people use the change utility to merge items that they just want to go away into like one big ZZZ obsolete item that's easy to filter out of reports, and then they don't show in the lookup and things like that. If this is something you need done, reach out to us. We have step-by-steps for this that walk you through it. It's not difficult, but you do have to do it very carefully. Otherwise, you could accidentally like merge your entire inventory into one item. So don't do that. So reach out to us. We're happy to help. And then that's, again, another case for having those good backups, because if this is done, like it does tell you, this process is irreversible. So be careful with that one, but know that it exists in case you need it. The purging item history, if the data is old enough, it would let you take the item and miscellaneous item history out using this. This is again something you want to make sure you have run all of your detailed reports before you do this, but just so you can see what it looks like, it literally is just going to take history out before. This is the 8 years that it's using here. So if you've made your archive company and now it's time to get some of that older stuff out, that's what we use. The zero quantity costing tiers, if you have LIFO, FIFO, lot, or serialized items, and you have some tiers in there that are zero, and you just want to get them out of there, that's what this guy's for. Recalculate is one we use if we had to make a change behind the scenes, and then we need this to reflect that change. That's what recalculate item history is going to do. If you are changing valuation, you have LIFO items and you want them to be FIFO. These 3 tasks help you accomplish that. The first one, oh yeah, okay. It's really picky, like you're seeing, on when you can do them. I'll go ahead and clear that physical count so that we can see it at least. But you can't have any open invoices or purchase orders or unposted production management transactions. It may even throw some more. No, okay. So essentially you're just saying my new valuation is going to be, let's say FIFO, and which item code do I need to have? In certain examples, it will also require that you have the zero quantity on hand. So even you're taking out all your quantity, you're then changing the valuation, and then you bring back in your quantity at the new valuation. So it's not the easiest process, but it is totally doable. So the selection would let you choose an entire range of inventory items. Maintenance lets you specifically just one-off. This is telling me I've got, it's currently lot and I've got 1,885 on hand. And if I want to move it over to FIFO, I can do so here. Let's see if it'll actually let me. And once I've reviewed and made sure these all look like what I want them to, the item valuation change register / update will actually post that and make that change. So in this case, I'm going from lot valuation to FIFO, and so it's not requiring me to take all the on-hand quantity out. If I am going from FIFO to lot, since I have to give it lot numbers, it would not allow me to do it with any on-hand quantity. I'd have to zero that out, change the valuation, and then bring them back in with lot numbers. But this one's happy to do it. Like, woohoo. There's the new. So that's the item valuation. You can use that to change your valuation. The automatic cost and price changes. So if you are using standard, well, okay, there's a little trick to this. Your valuation can't be standard, but if you just are using that field to hold a standard cost, but your actual valuation is LIFO, FIFO, or lot or serial, then you can use this to change your costs and your prices by a percentage or an amount or a, in this case, I can use the average cost, and that's going to take the average cost and set it as the standard cost. Pricing, you can again change as a percentage of the price. You can set a specific amount, like everything needs to go up by $5. And then which field are you changing, standard price, retail price, or change both of them? You can specify do this by product line, do it by a specific vendor. So if your vendor has raised your costs and everything you sell needs to be increased accordingly, this is a fast way to do it instead of going each item and manually changing it. It's important to note that if you are using standard cost, You can't change it here because that would impact the general ledger. And so to change the standard cost, okay, you have to use these three friendly guys, which is the standard cost adjustment entry and then the register to update it. Yeah. So similar to what we've seen before with the selections, if you're changing your standard cost, everything can go up, let's just say 5%. If I click proceed here, it's going to grab all of the items that are already standard cost valuation. It's only choosing standard cost. And now it's telling me this is my new calculated standard cost. Everything went up 5%. I can delete these, I can change them manually, whatever I like. And I can just click accept here. Because of course it was perfect the first time. And then there's a register to make those changes. Because again, standard cost has to be revalued to the general ledger if you're using that valuation method. So you can see it's going to make all these adjustments. Total of $14.99.49. And I'm going to let that update. I have an item with a 0 standard cost or a negative standard cost. I'm going to go ahead and let that go through, but normally that would be something I'd want to check out. And you can see it's going to post to the general ledger. So those of us who've been using Sage for a long time, it didn't used to work that way. That was a change they made about 10, 15 years ago. And it's correct, but it's as far as, you know, general ledger and keeping everything in sync and auditable, but it definitely caused some struggle when it first got changed. Okay, so the last couple of utilities here, the changing lot and serial expiration dates, it literally does that. It just lets you make bulk changes to the item expiration dates if you are using those. Removing inactive, again, sounds excited, like it's gonna work for you, but if that item has any history or activity, it can't be removed. But this is if you accidentally set up a whole bunch of items and you didn't mean to, you can, and they're marked as inactive, this remove inactive items will take them out. The delete warehouses is kind of the same animal, only if it's marked as inactive and does not have any on-hand quantities in it. But this is something that's been added in the last version or so, where you can finally get rid of a warehouse if you no longer use it. That's exciting. So, but again, you can't have any items with an on-hand quantity in that warehouse, and it can't be the default warehouse for any of your items. But as long as those two conditions are met, you can get rid of it. Yay. Changing warehouses lets you merge warehouses together. This one does not require you to not have items in there, but just keep in mind that if that item is, it's going to be merged, so your on-hand quantities are going to be combined and recalculated in the new combined warehouse. You can also renumber, like right now you have the 3-character code. If you wanted to use a different 3-character code for the same warehouse, change is also going to be how you would do that. By putting a brand new value in this new warehouse. Like, I love demo data because I can just kind of destroy it. So if I actually wanted that to be 999, it would take all of my items in the 099 warehouse and move them to a new created warehouse called 999. And if I press that, see if it actually makes sense. Let's do it. And he's saying he's a new warehouse, so be aware of that. And there we go. A lot of prompts there, but I now have a new warehouse. 999 and 099 is gone. So for those of you that have been stuck with warehouse codes you hate, you can get rid of them, rename them. And then purging the item audit report, if that's not part of your period end, you can do it here manually. And that's the same criteria that you saw when I pushed that purge button. So if you have users that don't have access to the purge button, you can come here and run it as part of your period end, if you would like to. Okay. I think that's all for inventory. What questions, thoughts, feelings do you have?
We actually have one question. Is there a way to create a list of inactive inventory items to review before removing them?
Such a good question. Thank you for this question. So the way I would do that, if somebody asked me, is to utilize this lookup here. So the ALE, or the automatic lookup engine. The inactive column is already part of the default. So what I can do here, I could just click and sort. I don't have any inactives. Hang on, let me set one as inactive. And that's done here. On the additional tab. So now I have one inactive item. Here he is. And to filter that out, I can click my filters button and I can go inactive is equal to yes, and click OK. And then assuming I had a much longer, and you like the question said, you wanted to review those, I would just click my Excel button right here and I would send that to Excel. And then I would have this list that I could work from to review those items. That's how I would do that. You can also, like in your inventory item listing, inactive is here somewhere. So print inactive items is an option here. So you could, I guess that's just going to include them. I was hoping we could filter them out. You're seeing why I do things through the lookups or through the explorers, because it's a little bit more friendly, but yeah, that's not a good option. So there, or then I mentioned the explorer. So this is and anytime I get to demonstrate the explorers, it makes me happy. So you all have these, the explorer, it's in the explorer folder of inventory. All the modules have them, but here, if inactive is not already part of the standard view, cruising. Nope, it's not. Okay, so what you can do, go back to the beginning here. If you right click and choose column settings, here's all the columns that can be added. And if you don't need some of these, like you're like, I don't care about volume and weight and all that, like you can uncheck them so they don't appear there. And then you can also click add right here. And these are the tables that we can get data from. Unfortunately, we can't add new tables to that, but an active item is a value right there. So I can click OK. It automatically adds it to the bottom or the end. I click OK though. Gonna go over and get it. I try to move slow so I don't make everybody seasick. Okay. And then I can go la 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 la. Sorry, you're realizing why. Don't. Yeah. Okay. But you can do this little filter and just say, show me only my inactives. This one's kind of a nice way because you're seeing here in this lower grid, any transactions with that item would be here. I could also see any vendors I had for that item, any quantities on hand by warehouse. So think of this as a way to look at all your data at once instead of specific, going item by item. And the final glory here is when you get something you like, you can go file, export, and then you have lots of options to send it to Excel or Word, or you can send page by email or text, or I don't know. Well, that's an export to text. You're not actually texting. To clarify, but this, you could email what you generated here. So those would be my two top ways of finding my inactive items. Any others?
No, ma'am, that's the only question. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the extent of the content I have for today. If there's questions that came to you about purchase order or sales order or the closing order, you can ask those as well, or I'll hand it back to Deanna.
Perfect. Kate, thank you so much for the presentation today, and thank you to everyone who attended. As a quick reminder, you will get a recording, a link to the recording. It usually takes about 24 hours. You should have gotten the handouts, but if something happened and you still need those, reach out. I'll be happy to send them again. And then last but not least, most of you, if you had registered last week for sure, should have received an email regarding year-end processing and requirements relative to that. So those of you on supported versions of Sage 100, which are versions 2022, 23, and 24, are likely going to need product updates, an IRD, and if you have payroll, a payroll upgrade. It depends on your version and your needs. But if you run a large number of 1099s, you definitely want to make sure we get that product update loaded. And for payroll module users, you're going to need to get that upgraded and the IRD loaded as well. So we are proactively scheduling that right now. If you are going to be in need of those updates, go ahead and reach out and we'll get you on the calendar now. Sage is expecting to release those on December 20th. So we can schedule it for any time after that. So my direct line is 214-800-5564. My email, dcarrillo, 2 R's, 2 L's, @microaccounting.com. Like I said, just reach out and we'll be happy to make sure we get you taken care of for year end. So at this point, there are no additional questions. So I think we are completed and adjourned. Everyone have an amazing day and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.